The year is 2023. This is Eastern Europe, and Russia has invaded Ukraine. The conflict of Ukraine is one simply about geopolitics of old. It dates back as far as the Russian Empire and as recent as the Soviet Union. To look into this, we need to analyse the mind of Putin, as well as his geopolitical manoeuvring into what we have reached is this spot presently. Well, to begin with, the war's origins have been shaped by a paranoid Putin, whose fears were stowed early on by the Ukrainian Revolution, and Putin losing his puppet, Viktor Yanukovych. The idea that Putin could lose control of Ukraine has been once stoked over the fact that Ukraine has been building its closer relationships with the EU and the West as a whole. And to say the least, Putin's ultra-nationalistic rhetoric is about restoring the old Russian Empire. It's simply one about him modelling himself after Peter the Great and forming this greater Russia. One that stretches as far as Manchuria and all the way to Transnistria. It can be seen that Russia's intentions are there for a greater Russia. One special piece that clearly shows Putin's intentions with this war and the idea of a greater Russia can be seen within his article on the historical unity of Russians and Ukrainians. In it he details, and I quote, "The idea of Ukrainian people as a nation separate from Russians has no historical basis, and could not have been any conclusions were substantiated by any sort of concoctions, went as far as to claim that Ukrainians are the true Slavs and Russians, the Muscovites, are not." It clearly underpins the idea that Putin sees Russia as Ukraine's hegemon and merely a piece to be used on a chessboard against the West, and further highlights Putin's mentality of imperialism. So regardless, we have looked into the mind of Putin and his justification for this war, one with imperialism that's stoked with the idea of paranoia of Western expansion. One of the main issues that Putin will now face is with the, quote, unconfirmed death of Prigozhin, the former head of the Wagner Group, a Russian private military company that sees operations across Africa, the Middle East, and the globe. A private military company that has strongholds in Mali, which has undergone a coup itself, deposing a government that was friendly to France and the EU, replacing it with a military junta that has itself removing UN peacekeepers and French troops, and coincided with Wagner filling the void. So, some would argue that the death of Prigozhin and Utkin, and the founder and namesake of Wagner, has caused infighting. Regardless, if it is the case that Putin and the FSB have organised both of their deaths, we need to remember that authoritarian leaders thrive off infighting as a tool of coup-proofing. Putin allowed Wagner and Prigozhin to be openly critical of the military leadership of Russia. The idea of pitting bulldogs against each other while Putin holds the leash is one that can come to mind. The RAND Corporation, standing for Research and Development, an American non-partisan think tank, details coup-proofing methods, such as coming in the form of the creation of an armed force parallel to the regular military, the development of multiple internal security agencies with overlapping jurisdictions that constantly monitor one another. In this instance, it's clear that ideas of groups that can relate to this specifically can be the FSB itself, the KGB, and the SS of Nazi Germany, being ones that are loyal to the leader, yet also keep groups like the military and other rivals in check. But one could argue that the power vacuum filled by Wagner's lost leadership, it is one that can reduce the effectiveness of coup-proofing. But as CGP says it well, the keys must get their rewards. The likelihood of a power vacuum can be most likely seen as unlikely. Putin could simply provide Wagner as a trophy to a loyal supporter or several supporters, seeing Wagner as a mere treasure to be handed out. This would ensure that Putin maintains his geopolitical aims in Mali and Africa as a whole. But regardless, what Prigozhin's death means is a message to Putin's current allies and most likely the military leadership. Remain loyal, and most importantly, competent. Keep fighting the Ukrainians, and keep fighting amongst yourselves. Keep me in power.